coordinator. We are just going to start up here and talk about a couple of logistics. So we can have the next slide. And before we begin, I'd like to go over how the webinar tool works, particularly for those of you who are new to online trainings. We're using the GoToWebinar platform, and as attendees, you have a control panel. If you're joining us today by telephone, you will need to enter your audio pin. If you're using VoIP, please make sure you have selected mic and speaker. You can switch between the two at any point if you want. You'll lose audio briefly, but it shouldn't take more than a minute to make the switch. All callers have automatically been placed on mute, but we do really want to hear your questions and feedback throughout the training. There are two ways to communicate with us during the training. First, you can type a question at any time into the question log, and we'll type an answer back to you. We may share any comments or questions in the comment box with all the participants if it's appropriate. Second, if you'd like to ask the presenter a question directly or have something you'd like to add or comment on, please press the Raise Your Hand button on the control panel and we will unmute you so you can speak. We'll pause after each presenter. I would like to note that this training is being recorded so that we can make it available to you and your coworkers on the LSNTAP website. You will receive an email once this material has been posted with a link directing you to it. I welcome you to share the recording and other resources with your coworkers who might not have been able to attend today's training. I'd like to also note that today's training is presented by Pro Bono Net in partnership with LSNTAP and the Northwest Justice Project with funding provided by the LSNTAP grant. So again, welcome to Innovations in Technology Enabled Pro Bono. I'm going to hand it over to Liz Keith, the Law Help Project Manager.
Great. Thank you, Xander, and welcome again to everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. As Xander mentioned, I'm Liz Keith, and I'm the Law Help Program Manager at Pro Bono Net, and this is Innovations in Technology Enabled Pro Bono. And this series is part of a series of webinars focusing on strategic issues to help legal services organizations understand how they can use technology to meet their mission and service delivery goals. And these trainings are offered through a partnership between Pro Bono Net and LSNTAP, which is coordinated by the Northwest Justice Project. And again, we're grateful to LSD for its support of this series and investment in technology innovation in legal services. So this is National Pro Bono Week, a time when there's a spotlight on the need for pro bono, the essential services that your programs and volunteers deliver throughout the year, and the partnerships that form the basis for many pro bono efforts. So in keeping with those themes, today's webinar is going to focus on how technology can support those areas and build the capacity of the pro bono sector to mobilize and support volunteers. So we'll look at several innovative but replicable projects that are doing just that. And we welcome you to join the conversation on Twitter. If you tweet, you can use the hashtag LSNTAP to follow or tweet and discuss this topic today. So we have a great panel with us and really appreciate their time and willingness to bring their expertise to this topic. Adam Friedel is our pro bono coordinator at Pro Bono Net, and Adam is going to talk about a remote pro bono pilot project in the New York City Family Court to make volunteer attorney services available in a new county. And then Eric Cole, the director of the Tennessee Alliance for Legal Services, will discuss online10justice.org, a web-based pro bono clinic to increase access to assistance for low-income Tennesseans and reduce barriers to pro bono participation. And then Claudia Johnson, the Law Help Interactive Program Manager at Pro Bono Net, will discuss how interactive forums are building the capacity of pro bono programs and providing increased support to volunteers. And then lastly, Michael Solar, Communications Director of Public Counsel in LA, will discuss a mobile app called Force for Good that Public Counsel launched earlier this year, and consideration for using mobile strategies generally for volunteer communication and volunteer mobilization. So thank you again to all of our panelists for bringing your perspectives to this topic. So Before we move to our panel, I wanted to start off with a few brief themes and some context to this topic. So we have two really strong hooks to today's session. The first, of course, is National Pro Bono Week. But there's also the LSD Pro Bono Task Force report that was released earlier this month, and I've included a link to that on this slide. If you haven't read it, I encourage you to take a look. There are a few themes and recommendations that stood out to me, many of which your programs may be doing already, but I think were really underscored in an important way in the report. So those include a recommendation to establish a pro bono incubation or innovation fund modeled on the TIG program. So this, in the future, may be a potential funding stream for the kinds of innovations that you'll hear about today. The report also recommended providing a range of opportunities to engage all segments of the bar, including solo and small firm attorneys, rural attorneys, corporate counsel, and others, as well as mechanisms for engaging non-attorney volunteers, so law students, paralegals, administrative staff. The report also underscored the notion of using pro bono lawyers to support self-help services. And then there was also a recommendation to develop more rigorous evaluation methods to guide pro bono program development and understand client outcomes. And then technology was also a theme in the report, and there was a section dedicated to this with a variety of examples. But as I think you'll hear from today's panel, technology really cuts across and can support all of the areas above. So what's the case for using technology in a pro bono context? Some of the ways technology can benefit your volunteers include creating new pathways, new forms of pro bono participation, supporting involvement by non-traditional and non-attorney volunteers. So we'll talk about involvement by law students in one of these projects. Technology can also support work that is commensurate with a volunteer's interest and skill level and allow practitioners to access and benefit from the skills and knowledge of other experts regardless of where they're located. It allows you to do rapid response and highly personalized communication with volunteers, distribute volunteer attorney resources where they're most needed. Technology often can provide entree or opportunities for new partnerships, and it can create a presence, so to speak, for your services in areas of your catchment area where you don't have a physical presence. And that theme will be underscored in several examples today. And then, of course, for clients, I think one of the most powerful benefits is the way that technology can help bridge service gaps. So whether those gaps are geographic to rural areas or underserved regions in cities, or bridge language gaps, or other kinds of barriers, traditional barriers to accessing services. Technology can also improve the efficiency and overall support for pro bono, which in turn can lead to an increase in both the quantity and quality of services available. And while there are still very real gaps in technology access, internet access, and technology literacy, increasingly we're seeing clients are looking to the web and web-based tools for help. So whether that's websites, online chat, online forums, or other types of online tools. So those are some benefits and I think some indicators of the case for using technology in pro bono that we hope you'll bear in mind throughout the examples and see woven into the examples that we'll turn to now. So we'll go ahead and start it off with Adam, who is going to talk about the New York Family Court Remote Services Pilot Project.
Thanks, Liz. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. My name is Adam Friedel, and I'm the Pro Bono Coordinator at Pro Bono Net. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about a pilot project that we're doing where we're trying to amplify the reach of the New York Access to Justice's volunteer attorney program in family court. If you want to go to the next slide, Liz. Just to give people a little bit of background about family court and the problem that we're trying to address with the program. These are the case types that, or the cases that New York Family Court has jurisdiction over. The big ones, the most common ones are custody and visitation, child support, guardianship, but they really run the range. And I would like to point out that you'll notice one thing that may seem like a big absence to some people, which is divorce or matrimonial cases. In New York, the family court doesn't address those, so the numbers that we discuss weren't included. Next slide, please. So these are some numbers to give people an idea of the challenge that the courts are facing right now. In 2005, you can see that family court judges made approximately 2,120 dispositions. That means a ruling ending a case in one way or another, 2,120 per year, which is 4 times basically the next highest one, which is Supreme Court. Another way to think of it is that in 2006, 127 judges around the state were responsible for over 680,000 new cases filed. So it's a real mountain that they're facing. And adding to that burden is the percentage of litigants who are proceeding pro se in family court is over 80%. And that is including, that's taking account of the fact that New York has liberal rules for right to counsel in certain cases. So in New York, parents in custody cases, children, or in termination of parental rights cases, and a few other situations, if they can't afford counsel, they have counsel provided for them. Even so, more than 80% of people are without lawyers. Next slide, please. So the Access to Justice here in New York has come up with a program to try to address this issue. It's called the Volunteer Attorney Project. And essentially it's unbundled legal services provided by pro bono attorneys who consult with pro se litigants in family court. They don't actually make court appearances with them, but they consult with them outside of court, give them advice about their cases. And this program is operating in 4 boroughs currently: Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, and the Bronx. And I've included a map for people who aren't familiar with New York City, but you'll notice that there is one borough that is not included, which is sort of the one that always gets left out, which is Staten Island. Next slide, please. Staten Island, also known as Richmond County, so if I use those terms interchangeably, they mean the same thing, hasn't been covered in the past by the volunteer attorney program due to geography and proximity. The main factor is geography. On the map, the distance looks pretty small from the other boroughs to Staten Island. It's just a very short trip across the river, but it's amazing the degree to which that puts up a barrier for getting pro bono attorneys to work in Staten Island. Here in New York City, many people don't drive, and so you have to take the subway to the ferry, to a bus on the other side of the ferry to get to the family court. It's extremely inconvenient and difficult. It essentially takes a whole day, even if you're only going to participate in the pro bono work for a couple of hours. There are a couple of, as I note here also, there's a lack of resources in the Staten Island court, particularly a lack of personnel dedicated to providing these sort of programs. Next slide, please. So the idea that we are currently piloting to try to address this situation is a remote service project. Essentially, what we are trying to do is to use video conferencing to make it possible to counsel pro se litigants in Staten Island without the pro bono attorneys actually being in Staten Island. So as you see in the first bullet, the volunteer attorneys are currently based in established project sites in Kings, which is Brooklyn, and New York, which is Manhattan counties, to assist pro se litigants in other counties. We make use of scanners and remote IP printing to deliver documents from litigants to volunteers and vice versa. And just to be clear, when we say remote IP printing, what we mean by that is that you can be sitting at a computer in Manhattan and you can click print on the document and make it come out at the printer in Staten Island, or vice versa. And then we were also making use of a volunteer attorney project, court attorney, to aid the Richmond County Family Court in screening the litigants and briefing volunteers. So this has been a combination of leveraging technology to increase the reach of the program, and that in turn, I think, has encouraged the court system to make more resources available to see how far the project can go. Next slide, please. So the technological requirements of the program are essentially computer stations equipped with video conferencing software, cameras, microphones, speakers, a printer, and a scanner. Many newer computers obviously have most of this stuff built in, so it's not really an issue. But the court system here is dealing with a lot of older equipment, and so a lot of the components that we're using, the cameras and speakers, etc., are external. The second thing that's really important is secure, stable lines of communication. The video conferencing with and consulting with a litigant is definitely a different experience, a little bit from doing it in person, and so you want to make sure that the lines of communication are easily accessible and very stable, so your calls aren't dropping or you're having trouble hearing each other. And lastly, the human element. We need currently we have a court attorney who does intake with the litigant and is there to brief the volunteers, assist them when they need help, and also is able to access the court's case management system to view the case history and any filings or anything that's happened in the past. Next slide. So this is the kind of the nuts and bolts of the pilot program. We're starting out from New York County to Richmond County. That's Manhattan to Staten Island. And below you see a very bad approximation of Staten Island Ferry. So the way that it works is that the court attorney who is in charge of the volunteer attorney project travels once a week to Richmond County to conduct litigant intake. So the program is currently operating, or will be operating, once a week. Volunteer attorneys then go to the family court in Manhattan, where we have essentially a workstation set up for them, and they are connected to Staten Island using what is called Polycom telepresence, and that is simply a video conferencing system, proprietary system that the court currently uses. Although I would say they don't use it very much, so one of the exciting things about this project is that we're really taking advantage of technology that they already have. Next slide, please. And just briefly to go through the process of how it actually works, the court attorney will conduct an intake with the litigant in Richmond. in Staten Island. Then the litigant goes to the waiting room, and the court attorney makes a video call to the volunteer attorney in Manhattan, briefs them on the case, prepares them to do the consultation. If the litigant has brought any documents, maybe they've brought petitions or police reports or things that the consulting attorney would need to see, then the court attorney can simply scan them and remotely print them, and they'll come out at the printer that's sitting right next to the volunteer attorney in Manhattan. Then the court attorney escorts the litigant into another room next door, which we call the consultation room in Staten Island. And there, the volunteer attorney in Manhattan, another video call. So we essentially have 3 terminals. We have one in Manhattan where the volunteer attorney is present, and then we have 2 in Staten Island, one in the intake room and one in the consultation room. So the consultation takes place via video conference. If at any point the volunteer attorney has a question or needs to get some further information from the court attorney, they simply mute. They let the litigant know that they'll be right back. They mute the video call and just pick up the telephone and call the court attorney, get the information that they need, and then come back and unmute. They finish the consultation, and then if anything has come up during the consultation that maybe the volunteer attorney found some information online that would be helpful to the litigant, or has flyers for services that the litigant can take advantage of, again, they can simply remotely print those things, and so they'll come out at the printer that is right behind the litigant in the consultation. Next slide, please. So these are some advantages that we think are to be had from this pilot project. Kings, which is Brooklyn again, and New York, which is Manhattan County, family courts are centrally located, so they are very easy to get to for pro bono attorneys, and very popular. The second bullet notes that they already have an existing infrastructure for coordination and supervision of volunteers. In other words, the program already exists. What we're doing is trying to apply technology to it to extend its reach and its effectiveness. Both counties have dedicated tech personnel to set up video conferencing and IT printing. This is something I think we're trying to try to convince the court system of the how invaluable technology can be, so that they might be able to dedicate a few more resources to making these things available. One of the challenges at the beginning of this project was that the family court building in Staten Island is pretty old and dilapidated, and a lot of their technology was not really up to par to participate in this program, to hold video conferences without dropping them, etc. So that's a challenge that we had to address. Lastly, a big advantage in our favor is that the court attorney who oversees the volunteer attorney project is really enthusiastic about this. She's not the most tech savvy, or at least wasn't at the beginning, and so one of our challenges was to go through it with her and make sure that she feels comfortable doing the work. And I think that now she does, and she's really excited about using the program, and she gets very giddy when it all works out right. So it's great. Next slide, please. Some disadvantages or challenges that we are currently working on. One is that the court attorney has to travel to Staten Island right now once a week to make the program work. We are hoping to address that by having her train other court personnel, and not necessarily court attorneys, but clerks or other people who might be more available to conduct intakes at the site where the litigants are. Also, we're thinking about scaling challenges when we try to move beyond Staten Island to other family courts in the state. A big one is that, and I alluded to this, but the technology infrastructure doesn't exist or doesn't exist at the same level in many of the courthouses around the state. And so, that's sort of a first step that has to be overcome anytime we think about launching this project in the community. Lastly, one issue that we have tried to minimize as much as possible is litigant unfamiliarity with technology. We've essentially made the system such that the litigant doesn't really have to do anything or know anything about technology. When the video call is made, their terminal will pick up automatically, and they essentially just sit in front of the camera and converse with the volunteer attorney.
So, Adam, we've got a few
Yeah?
people here who are asking what a court attorney is. They're not familiar with that term.
Hey, yeah, that's a great question. It is an attorney assigned by the court system to oversee the volunteer attorney pro bono program. Does that make sense?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, great. And if we could see the next slide. So these are some of the future goals that we are moving towards. The big one is to expand service locations beyond New York County. One of the things that we're thinking about is that I think New York has a couple of 100,000 lawyers, but something like half or more than half of them are located in Manhattan. So the rest of the state is often really underserved, and we want to be able to provide a way for pro bono attorneys, even within New York City, to serve litigants around the state. Second, we want to use reduced barriers to entry to attract more attorneys to do pro bono work in the family courts. We want to make it as easy as possible for pro bono attorneys to participate, and ultimately what we are aiming towards, the dream, is something that we call pro bono at your desk, which would basically mean that the video conference would be able to take place from the pro bono attorney sitting in their office. They simply, if they have a camera built into their laptop, they could do a video conference with the litigant in whatever court they happen to be in, and they could also contact the court attorney in whatever court they happen to be in. So distance really becomes irrelevant. And lastly, we are hoping to involve legal services attorneys to take on this mentoring role and assist the volunteer attorneys that the court attorney is currently handling. The court is very stretched on resources, and so the more that we can involve other service providers, other experienced family court and family law attorneys in the process, the greater we think the reach will be. I think that's the last slide. Can we see the next one?
Okay. We've got a few questions here. One is on the cost of the proprietary video conferencing equipment.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a startup cost? What's the ongoing cost for that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So there is a cost. The court system, as I said, before we were ever involved in their with this project, they have their own proprietary system they use called telepresence. I'm not sure exactly what the startup or carrying cost for that is. It's built into the court budget. But one thing that we've been discussing is when we potentially move beyond the courthouse, so pro bono attorney would be working for their office, for example, that software won't be available to them, most likely. And so we have been talking about using Skype, using Google Hangouts, or a variety of other free services, and I think ultimately that's what will happen.
Yeah, the video conferencing software that we use through Polycom here at Northwest Justice Project is extremely expensive. We're several $1,000s a year in licensing plus hardware. So the free alternatives are definitely a good way to look.
Yeah, that's something that we have been discussing with the court system. You know, they are not always the most technologically progressive, I would say, and so we've kind of been really trying to ease them into the idea of using a different system, but I think they're becoming more and more open to it.
So another question that we've got here is, how does insurance work with regards to court attorneys or volunteer attorneys? Are those covered by the legal aid organization, or?
Sure. So malpractice coverage is, it's my understanding, I'm 98% confident about this, that pro bono attorneys are covered under the umbrella of the volunteer attorney project while they're doing the work. So whether they are doing it remotely or they're doing it in person, they're covered while doing the work. And the court attorneys are their employees of the court system. So technically, they are not giving advice to the litigants. They are only mentoring the volunteer attorneys in family law issues.
I just wanted to mention somebody, a couple of people had followed up asking about Skype as a potential technology, and as Adam said, in looking at the expansion that the project is contemplating and being able to have the volunteers do this from their desk, that is one of the tools that this program is looking at, and certainly something that that others could look at for a low-cost or free solution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we're exploring a lot of different options: Skype, Google Chat, or Google Hangout. You know, there's a variety of services, and so I think it will just be an ongoing conversation with the court system about, you know, what they feel comfortable with in terms of security and effectiveness.
I think there are a couple other questions in the chat box, but I think I'll go ahead and move us along, and if we don't get to all of the questions, we'll try to get to them at the end, or if not, follow up with people individually by email. But definitely keep the questions coming. They've been really great so far. So thank you, Adam.
Yeah, no, thank you all very much. And if anybody has further questions or wants to talk to me more, feel free to email me. Thanks.
Great. So keying off of Adam's comment about looking to potentially move towards a model where attorneys could do pro bono from their desk, I think that's a great transition to our next panelist, Eric Cole, the director of the Tennessee Alliance for Legal Services, who's going to talk about online 10 justice. And this project was highlighted about a year and a half ago in an NTAP Pro Bono Net webinar when it was about 4 months old. So we asked Eric to rejoin us for folks who may have missed that. I think it's a really exciting initiative, and to hear how things are going a year plus in. So Eric, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Liz, and thanks everybody for listening and for the opportunity. As Liz indicated, we launched in, we started work in 2010 and launched in April of 2011 with this project. My agency is the State Legal Aid Support Center for Tennessee, and working pretty closely with our state bar, and then during development, our Supreme Court created an Access to Justice Commission, and they've set forth a series of strategic plans and goals for the state. All of that was kind of happening around the time this idea was generated. And the real need that we needed to address in Tennessee, and are still trying to address, was getting pro bono resources that are intensely kind of clustered around the urban areas into the more rural areas where we have large pockets of poverty and a great deal of need. The other factor in the environment of limited resources and for funded for legal services programs, certainly the court and the bar and TALS and my agency all have really focused on increasing pro bono participation as a key strategy to try to fill in some of the gap that's there because of the lack of resources. The court recently adopted the commission's goal of increasing pro bono participation in Tennessee to over 50% statewide by 2013, which is fairly aggressive. In order to do that, we had to we've employed a number of strategies, and this was kind of the first one out of the box that came from the three different agencies really working hard on a statewide plan. So the online tinjustice.org website is really like a pro bono clinic online, and it's really designed to be flexible, both for in terms of time, but also in terms of practice for the pro bono attorney that's participating in it. They're able to self-select the questions that they want to answer. They're able to self-select the regularity with which they actually go on and log into the site and use it and answer questions. We find that has been fairly helpful for new attorneys or attorneys that are just getting into pro bono work, because they can try out some new areas of the law. Perhaps, if you're a corporate contracts attorney, they may not have any experience doing custody or evictions or whatnot, so they can actually get a little bit of experience. They can see what our client base, the issues that are facing the client base, and kind of understand some of that human interaction that takes place. So the basics of the site is anybody that qualifies in Tennessee can ask the lawyer for legal help with a legal issue, and our qualifying screen is variable. I mean, we can adjust it over time, and we're actually looking at that right now in terms of our poverty guidelines. We are at 250% and below of the federal poverty guidelines right now, not incarcerated, and then less than $5,000 in assets. One of the things that we run into if we talk about going up in the guidelines is you don't want to run off or frustrate pro bono lawyers or private attorneys, particularly in smaller towns, because you don't want to suddenly be taking business away from them. So we're obviously working with the state bar. We're relatively mindful of that. We are able to do that 250% income limit because we're completely independently funded. Most of our funding has come from a corporate counsel pro bono grant here in Tennessee that our state bar has initiated about 6 years ago, but we've also gotten funds from local foundations and local donors who support the project. Clearly the biggest response, clearly the biggest kind of contributor we've had was Baker Donaldson, Behrman and Berkowitz, which is a big firm out of Memphis. They had a key champion who was a part of our Supreme Court's commission, and he basically told his tech team they needed to do this. So that, coupled with upfront donations from Dell and Microsoft, were crucial for us to get off the ground. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah, perfect. So we talked a little bit about the enhancing access to low-income folks. We do think this obviously allows us to hit clients who may not be able to be served by traditional legal aid services. a lot of our referrals, as you might imagine, because we're at that higher income level, come from the intake offices of our legal aid programs. And even in a couple of cases where we've had significant funding decreases, or if one of our rural offices loses an attorney, they've really plugged the site in as a stopgap while they kind of restructure their resources and try to get back in and open up their intake. So that's been, that's a help. I think it's useful. Obviously, there's no replacement for actual representation. And then the big one about removing barriers for the pro bono attorneys themselves is we really kind of envisioned the attorney who's on the go, is sitting sitting at the terminal at the airport, has a half hour, can pull out their smartphone or their tablet or their laptop and can get a little bit of pro bono credit for the work that they do. Tennessee has a couple of positive, the number of positive rule changes that have taken place over the years, but we have a limited scope representation rule that the Supreme Court adopted several years ago, and that fit very nicely with what we're trying to do here. There's no relationship established between us as the administrators and the client, but once the lawyer and the client engage in the back and forth questions, there is a limited representation, limited scope of representation that actually occurs. And the rule is really set up to protect the attorneys on ethical grounds, and really was created for in-face, Saturday legal clinics and those sorts of things. But that's been very helpful to have. The other one is that attorneys do receive CLE credit for their work on pro bono cases. It's a 5-to-1 ratio, so you have to do a fair amount of work to get an hour of credit, 5 hours worth. But we have certainly seen that as an inducement to get folks to help. Okay, Liz, you can go to the next one. So these are the partners that are in the project. As I mentioned, again, we try to do basic legal advice and basic legal information, and there isn't an expectation of long-term representation. It's totally anonymous. The client, it's totally anonymous except for one factor, and that's that the client does give a name that the attorney can see on their side. And the purpose for that was to allow at least a basic conflicts check on the attorney's side, mostly for their comfort level. Obviously, it's not the same as it would be if they'd gone through intake and a full conflicts check. But the anonymity is up to the lawyer. If the lawyer chooses to, say, okay, we can communicate, email me these documents, or, I'm happy to talk to you on the phone, they can choose to do that. And at that point, it leaves our system and is really between, the lawyer and the client in a pro bono, environment. We've had more of that happen than you would think. And several lawyers are really, it's interesting, I was paying close attention to the New York project because we've had lots of folks start asking us about, the ability to click to Skype or to be able to, kind of quickly communicate directly with the client. They don't, they're impatient about waiting for email response. Okay, Liz. So y'all, you're familiar with these, with the guidelines. We put this in our slide because we're often talking to social service agencies or groups that don't keep the poverty level in their heads, and so we have to demonstrate that to them. But you can see with the 250%, I mean, we get a fair, you really get into the working Tennessee, population of working Tennesseans, and we like that. Okay, so next slide, please. This is just a screenshot of how the site looks. and it's not it's not very frilly site. We did that intentionally. We really tried to keep the language at 5th grade reading level and worked with some of our community education experts to do that. You can see, your basic sign-in on the right-hand side as if you're coming back to the site, but also that's where lawyers can go through. And basically they just fill out a brief, explanation of who they are, their BPR number. We go in, and then that tees it up for us to approve them. We will not approve them if they're suspended or their license has been terminated, etc. But if they've had an issue but they're in good standing, we will approve them. The client then goes through the rules button there at the bottom, and that walks them through a step-by-step set of questions around everything from income to assets to age. And it does, we do stipulate you have to be a Tennessee resident. Now, clearly, any of these things, and they attested that all of that is true. Obviously, there are ways around that, but just like with the clinic setting, we felt like you can't do much to protect further than that. We also make a point to list all of the agencies in Tennessee that accept actual cases, that actually have case handlers, because we want that there for them, one, if they're turned away for some reason, or so that they can have quick access to all these other agencies that actually do provide direct representation. Okay, Liz. That was the same. Yeah, thank you. So we do break down our issue areas, mostly for the attorneys. The clients, it's interesting. A lot of times they will not self-select. What we would call the right issue area. But these are basically just the general issues that you would see in any legal aid setting. We've been heavily significantly heaviest on family law matters, as you might imagine. We've had 2,228 questions asked since we started, and family law has been 1,042 of those. So significantly higher than anything else. Other comes in behind them, then housing, then debt and purchases, and then work is the next highest that we've had. Okay, Liz? These are just our metrics on what we've, the participation. The attorneys, recruitment of attorneys was extremely smooth. We had about 200 attorneys almost from the launch of the site, thanks to the Bar Association, who really put it out there. We also benefited because our Supreme Court had a first ever pro bono summit about 2 months before we launched, so we were able to gather early participants there. We've had 2,500 roughly people that have been determined eligible, 2,200 questions. Our goal was 1,000 questions in the first year, so we've hit that and significantly gone over as we move through 2012, and we're pleased about that. We did have initial issues with recruiting clients, believe it or not, and we kind of thought we would be opening some floodgates when we started, and that we would not have the lawyers to keep up with the demand, and it was actually the flip of that. We were actually kind of beating the bushes for clients in order to have enough work for the lawyers to do. That has rebounded though, and I think especially in the last 2 or 3 months, we recently did a big presentation to all the juvenile court clerks and the general sessions clerks in Tennessee, and that really has taken, really helped the numbers come significantly up. Most of our questions we answer within 48 hours. We tell the attorneys if they take a question, they've got 3 days to respond. We have set, the site sets a color-coded matrix of, when a question is 10 days old, when it's 20 days old, when it's 30 days old. And so we can monitor that on our end about how fast they're being picked up or not picked up. We have said if it sits there for 30 days and we cannot find an attorney to answer the question, that unfortunately we aren't able to help you. The incredible thing is we've not sent out any of those notices yet. We've gotten everything answered within 30 days, which is really just a testament to the pro bono lawyers more than anything. We do send email updates to the full list of attorneys that are registered about once a week and say, there are 35 questions in the queue, we need your help. Or there are 20 questions in the queue, we need your help. And that usually generates a very rapid response of answering those questions. Liz, is there anything else there, or is that the end?
I think that's it.
Okay. Well, the last thing I think last couple things I would say, the email, use of the email and web structure is positive and negative, as you might imagine. I mean, there are still barriers for clients to get to a web-enabled computer, and there's a significant issue that we run into, which is they post the question and then maybe they can't get back to that same computer, or they lots of things happen in the time that it takes for the lawyer to respond. So we do have some where they will ask the question and then the lawyer responds and they kind of fade off into the ether, and that's unfortunate. And we don't require them to have an email address. Obviously, it's easier if they do, because then the system can shoot them a note that says, an attorney has picked up your question and sent you this response. So one of the things, we have a separate TIG grant that's around libraries and legal aid partnerships, and kind of working and coaching the librarians on how this site works, or on how folks can set up email addresses and whatnot. We'll be a part of that that training as well, because we want to help folks kind of be able to get in and use the site. The last thing is that the Baker Donaldson folks who created the system are very, very generous people, and we've actually been talking to a number of states over the last year about taking this project and replicating it other places. I think we have 2 states that are about ready to start basically using this same system. Baker will do some limited tech support that if a state or an agency or a bar just fills out a user agreement with them. It's their intellectual property, but we're not fundraising off of it or anything. You do have to have our expenses on our server. Again, they were donated, but it was about $5,500. We've got 2 units, 2 actual servers backing up each other. It runs here from our office. And it's a custom program that they created, but it uses basically a SQL server backbone. The main expense, we think, if somebody were to replicate it in their state, would just be having the developer that could work with modifying, removing all the references to Tennessee, all those sorts of things, and then ongoing tech support. I mean, these guys, the guys we work with are tech support for a massive firm, and yet they still find time to support us. So we estimate they've given us 1,000, 1,100 hours worth of work over the last couple of years, which is just invaluable. So that would be probably the one big hurdle for another state or locality wishing to take this on. But if anybody's interested, I didn't put my contact information here. I should have. Feel free to follow up with me. We have dummy logins to our future site, so you can get in and play around with the site and see what you think. And we're happy to counsel or help any other state And again, the offer from the law firm Baker Donaldson we think is extremely generous. So I think that's it. I'm happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you, Eric. And I added your email on the last slide, so
Perfect.
we'll show it there, and then we can send it out in the chat box as well. There
Perfect.
were several questions, and maybe we can respond to a couple that came in from a couple people that are kind of related. One was, is there any training that's provided to the attorneys that participate in this? And then somewhat related to that is a question about, are their answers monitored or reviewed in any way?
Both excellent questions. We did a YouTube training that you can get to from the site or from our website, which is www.tals.org, for the lawyers, just on how the system works and what they need to be mindful of. It walks through the lawyer use agreement, it walks through what the client's agreement side is. But no, we haven't had to do much more than that. We get all of the help questions here at our office, and the majority of what we get are people losing their passwords and their usernames, which is just a common issue. So we try to keep the site relatively simple for the lawyers so that they wouldn't have trouble with it. On the monitoring, we spot check and pull out questions pretty regularly just to kind of see how the system's working. One of the things that's happened with us is we have a few lawyers who answer a lot of questions, and so they are all quite good, and really most of them are general practice attorneys and really just do a fantastic job. So we aren't as worried about them. It's some of the ones that will pick up and answer, and we've not done a thorough monitoring of the quality of legal advice that's being given, but we know that's something we need to look at here, especially before we kind of get any larger. But largely, we found that attorneys will answer the ones that they have confidence that they can answer and leave the other ones alone. They can also take a question, decide they want to answer it, and then if they change their mind, they can put it back in the queue as well.
Great, thank you.
So have you done any follow-up surveys of users to figure out how useful it was, or whether it has impacted the need for pro bono full case representation otherwise, or that type of thing?
That's it. Yeah, we do an immediate survey when the case gets closed, and that's that gives us some some insight on whether it was helpful or not, or what their experience was. We've not done a longer term follow-up, and that is something I think would be very interesting to see, with the overall impact of the site. So that's a really good suggestion. We do, I forgot to mention this, we do put on the site an option for, we ask, do they have a court date? And we have them, put that actual date in, so that if it is, obviously if they come into the site and it's tomorrow, there's no guarantee. But if it's in, 2 weeks, that does give us and the attorney a little bit of, a notice of urgency to respond to the site. And we regularly tell our attorneys when we talk to them and when we communicate with them that, nothing wrong with referring the person straight to legal aid and, telling them to make their, basically saying, we think you've got a strong case and we think this could work. We don't, though, have any, it's not an, additional referral source for legal aid. We are not trying to circumvent their own intake processes. We have four federally funded legal aid programs in Tennessee. Each one does its own intake. So, we're not trying to circumvent that, though.
So how do most people end up finding the site?
We think a lot come from referral from the legal aid programs themselves. We're more, and a lot of it is people that have walked into offices. There's not a lot of linking, folks coming really from other sites. I mean, we've maximized our, the searchability of the site, and we did some early Google ads, and we found some traffic that way, but it's been much more effective to do word of mouth through caseworkers, social workers, legal aid programs, courts, clerks. I mean, right, and so we basically have we have some really nice promotional materials, and we just are mailing those out like crazy to clerks and libraries and programs to keep those on hand.
Folks can find those on the TAL's website.
Yeah, they're on the site too. And
panel there on the right. Great. Well, thank you, Eric. That's, I think, really great to hear how things are going a year out. And there were some other questions that maybe we can email to you offline to respond to about some of the mechanics of how it works. But thank you.
Happily. Thank you.
And we've touched on some other remote services trends to watch, and the next LSNTAP webinar will continue on this theme. But Claudia Johnson next will talk about some models for where volunteer attorneys are involved in remote document review. There were a couple of questions or comments in the chat about using live chat. So the model that Eric described is this kind of asynchronous model where the interactions are not happening at the same time. They may happen a few minutes or a few days later. There are a number of programs out there that are using real-time live help as an information and referral service, but also one program right now, and then next year another program that will be delivering legal advice using pro bono volunteers through live help. So there'll be another model coming online next year with that. And then another trend that's emerging is using what are commonly known as virtual law office platforms with secure client and volunteer portals where people can log in and attorneys can provide unbundled or full services. So that's still very new, much more common in the private sector, but something to keep an eye on. So we have a little bit less than 30 minutes left, and we're going to talk now about using interactive forms within pro bono projects and pro bono clinics, and then we'll wrap up looking at trends in mobile use and mobile support for volunteers. So we'll turn it over to Claudia to talk about online forms.
Okay, thank you, Liz. Hello, everyone. It's great to see so many people interested in the topic of technology and pro bono. I am going to speak medium pace. Hopefully, I won't get too fast, and showcase some projects that have been taking place and that are showing a lot of promise in the context of using online forms to help volunteer lawyers, volunteer clerks, law students, and even volunteer non-attorneys create legal documents. I think that some of the things that echo from the other presentations is demographics. Younger attorneys are expecting more technology to do things faster and more efficient. And so, offering them paper forms on big binders or CDs with forms that they can then retype as models is no longer what is expected, at least from the generation that is getting out of law school now or has been out for the past 5 to 10 years. Law Help Interactive is one of the online form models available in the US and Canada and Guam for creating online forms. We work, do various things, and one of the things that we do is that we train people and teach people how to create online forms that can be very quality for very many different audiences. It can be a pro bono lawyer, it can be a staff attorney, or it can be a person that is not an attorney. We provide all the technical infrastructure and all the support, and then we share, we identify, we work with 44 states and multiple court systems. And so as we identify best practices for either our courts or libraries or pro bono projects, we do things like this. We do webinars, we publish, we have a website. So we try to share as much to avoid replicating and to avoid you know, with limited resources, anything that somebody creates that may work in another context, if it seems like a good approach and we can verify it's a good approach, then we share. So that's what Law Help Interactive is, and I work with Miranda Watkins and others here at Pro Bono Net to support this infrastructure and continue in changing the way pro bono law is practiced across the US and Canada and other places. So let's move down. So I am not going to get into the technical issues here, explaining how LHI works. Some of you may have seen this before, some of you may have not. I would be happy to share additional information on the technical backend and how this works. But basically, this is very quick. You can create an interview, something that collects data. It takes the data, it matches it to a Microsoft Word document, and then that is through this program called Hot Docs. It puts those fields into that document, and then you get a document that can not only be the pleading or the letter or the instructions to the client. It can be anything that you want. It doesn't just have to be a court-approved form. You can watermark it. You can print it in multiple languages if you want to. It's very flexible, and LHI is the infrastructure that allows anyone who has Internet Explorer and a computer connected to the internet, and with Internet Explorer and Microsoft, they can create these documents from anywhere with a lot of guidance and a lot of help, which is very helpful for new pro bono lawyers who are not substantive experts. Like if you have somebody who practices commercial litigation, they may not be familiar with family law cases, for example. And through the form, you can put a lot of that guidance. So let's go next. So how are volunteers using Law Help Interactive forms? We're very lucky in a lot of states. The continuum where legal practice is being done is expanding through approval of unbundling rules. So we are no longer just a country that does direct representation, one lawyer, one client. We have now other models that are allowed within the context of practice of law. And so LHI forms are being used across the board spectrum. If you thought of it as a line, these things would fall somewhere along the continuum. And so in the sense of bringing lawyers, people who have spent 3 years training for law school, to give competent counsel and advice, etc., LHI forms can be used anywhere across there. So I'm listing here some of the examples in the direct representation, and then I'm going to dig into each of them. But you know, it can be done. An online form is very helpful in direct representation. It's very helpful also if all the attorney, that's the volunteer, is reviewing the pleadings or helping just prepare one particular, let's say it's a schedule of assets. With a good unbundled retainer, that could be done through an online form, and what takes 4 hours could be shortened to 45 minutes, and there would be a quality check, even if the person is not an expert. And then the other piece that is really evolving right now is this whole concept of triage and information and referral. With online forms, you can create templates that ask questions, and then at the end, you can put in a document that flags all the legal red flags, so that when the person sits down with the pro bono lawyer for the consult, or with the lawyer that's going to take the case, you could mail them that before they open the documents, and they can read all the red flags to see what is it that they're going to be ready for when they give this consult or focus on those particular red flags. So it's very flexible, and these are some of the ways that online forms on LHI are being used. So let's move next. So LHI is being used in 44 states. The bulk of the use on LHI has been in self-help. People who don't have attorneys created their own forms. However, about 85 to 20% of our use is in the attorney pro bono context. So looking at the states that have had the most volume from January to September, all of these states have a pro bono or multiple pro bono projects going on. So for example, in California, right now they have assembled 43,000 forms, most of them in family law. I would say that 15% of those would be a safe estimate to say have been assembled with the help of a pro bono lawyer, so 6,000 of those. In New York, it would probably be a higher number. In Idaho, it's probably, we're looking at about 2,000. In Illinois, they have very robust pro bono projects in libraries and in courts and in clinics, and they have a project with the ABA Young Lawyers in Consumer and Guardianship. Those are the top 5 areas of law. And we have assembled about 245,000 these just in the past 9 months, just family law pleadings. The way it is set up is that there's generally a place, and in this case I'm showing a court self-help center because a lot of courts are setting up self-help centers, and I know we have some court audience here. They set up a self-help center. Sometimes they teach pre-class to teach people the terminology so that they can do their own forms. And combined with that, if we move to the next slide, once people are trained or once they read, can we scroll down? They get sat on a computer bank that has the LHI forms. In our situation with LHI, we have 4 courts that have partnered with us to do this, independent in their self-help centers, and California and New York are 2 of the courts that are working on this with us. New Mexico and Arkansas is another set of courts. So the litigants can sit there. You can have law student volunteers. You could have paralegals. This could be anywhere. This doesn't have to be in a self-help center. It could be a clinic. It could be your basement library that's no longer used. You could set up something there on Saturdays and have people come and do their online forms. And then at the end, what generally happens in this type of situation, next screen please, is that then there's a one-on-one assessment with a lawyer that could be just giving advice and counsel, or could be giving advice and counsel and then deciding to take the case full rep, or just do a particular part, go to the hearing related to that motion, etc. So think about this as building blocks, and the online forms can be integrated and are being integrated and facilitating recruitment of pro bono lawyers and also pro bono services. So if we move to the next slide. So some of the benefits that our partners tell us they're finding is that all of the forms are standardized. There's logic checks and data entry checks, and the ability to recycle data entry. So let's say that you file an affidavit in forma pauperis in California. All of the caption information in there can be recycled to the divorce splitting, can be recycled to the notice of service, could be recycled to the 17 document captions that you would need for to get a divorce done in California. I think that you still need 17 different types of documents created to finalize a divorce. So all of the information is reusable. LHI has built-in capacity to do remote sharing, and I will talk a little bit more later on this. And all of the information can be built into the interview, so that if you have a lawyer that is not an expert, if a substantive lawyer created that interview, it is as if they're walking through the mind of that substantive expert, because they're following the interview and the interview is guiding them through to make sure that they're not missing anything, that everything is being calculated correctly. They can check links to the law, etc., etc. So let's just continue, and this will become clearer in a little bit. So I already mentioned that online forms are enabled in other languages. Right now we have Spanish live, and you can print the documents English, Spanish. We have some courts that are starting to do this through some pilot projects in California. And you can have the interview in English or Spanish or a different language. Let's go to the next screen. Again, just showing that you can also have a target language and a main language together, which is really great if you have monolingual volunteers or staff that don't speak the target language. You could have something in English, Spanish, English, French, Chinese, Vietnamese, etc. So let's move on to the next. So I'm going to show now some examples from California, Ontario, and Minnesota. So let's scroll down. In California, a model that has been working for a little bit that keeps doing amazing work and is expanding is called DASH. DASH is a program run by Neighborhood Legal Services in cooperation with the LA Superior Courts. And it started in the context of self-help, and they had attorneys review the forms. So let's move on. What is really amazing, if we can move to the next slide, is that even though there's only one staff attorney that oversees all the self-help centers across 4 different locations, they are serving over 5,000 litigants, and they have volunteers. They have both Justice Corps, AmeriCorps volunteers, but they also have pro bono lawyers that go to the different centers, and they are doing remote review of the forms that are being created every day in the different locations with the pro bono lawyers. So let's scroll down to the next slide. And what they used to do before they had this capacity is that they used to print the forms and then fax them to the pro bono lawyer or fax them to the supervising attorney, and it used to be a nightmare because some of the packages that they assemble can be over 100 pages, and then the lawyer would have to call, give the feedback on the pleadings, etc., and then have that entered in. Now with LHI, they can share on the back end, and the pro bono lawyer that is assigned to that case to review the pleadings can review them, make the modification, then send them back. The litigant in the other side, 100 miles away, or in LA, even if it's 10 miles away, that's a good 45-minute drive. The litigant can see that and accept and print and then file. So let's move on to the next page. Again, some of the benefits that they have found, a lot of it is just on the consistency and the accuracy, making sure that nothing is missed. And they have found significant time savings. These are high volume places. And with letting the lawyers do this remotely, the lawyers don't have to park and drive to downtown and spend, just the hours that it can take to get there and find a parking space. So it has enabled them to recruit more lawyers. So next slide. This point has been made. Next slide. Yeah, so this is that they're editing the declarations, and they have backup attorneys, etc., in different parts of the city, and not everybody's on the same place. Next slide. So this gives you an idea of where the centers are now popping up in LA County, and as you can see, some of the locations are in farther areas, not as close to downtown. There's a lot of freeways, and they started with 4 locations, and now they're setting up sub-satellites. Next slide. Some of the things that they're doing is that they have recruited certain shelter advocates that they have trained on how to use these forms, and so the shelter advocates are doing this for victims at the shelter with pro bono attorney backup somewhere else at a big firm in downtown from their office on maternity leave, etc. Next slide. And the other thing that they're doing...
we just have a couple minutes, so just let me know if you want me to jump ahead to Minnesota.
Okay, let me just finish this and we'll move to Minnesota. So the other thing that they have done is that they are partnering with police departments so that when victims go to the victim centers that exist in some states, the DOJ Victim Service, right then and there the police department can help them create a restraining order, and the victim can file, if the court has an agreement with the Justice Center, the victim can file from the Justice Center without having the victim go to downtown and go through the security and all of that. That is kind of stressful when you're just trying to get away from abuse. So there's a lot of growth and promise here. Let's just move really quickly. I want to show you a full rep to the Minnesota slides, and I believe is Idaho is not, yeah. So in Minnesota, they have a full representation project. They're very complicated expungement forms in Minnesota. The pleading requirements are very complex, and it has 3 steps. What Minnesota did is that they created a very good module for full representation for attorney months to take on these cases. And it was initially a very small investment, and it has now grown to be a very well-recognized project. So basically, in 2009, when they first created this expungement form package specifically for pro bono lawyers, they recruited over 134 volunteers that are taking these cases and helping people get their expungements. The last training that they did, they were telling me they trained over 200 attorneys. And in the first 6 months of the year, over 300 expungement packages were created using the online forms. Let's move to the next slide. What they have done, let's move to the next slide, this is their, is that they have created in their Advocate statewide website, they have a place where they have the pro bono expungement information for Minnesota, and in that website it has a step-by-step guide of how to get an expungement. So after the lawyer is trained, instead of sending them a binder, they get this link, and in here they can go and dig down, and if we click at the next slide, each of the steps has detailed step-to-step instructions, and once they get to the online interview for lawyers, let's click on this. This is their branding. They can see that they're on the right one. It's the pro bono form interview on No Help Interactive. And once they dig in, as the lawyer needs to, next slide please. Once the lawyer needs to dig in, if you look here, the little blue language, you know, it's a definitional thing. What is the difference between a case and a charge? As the lawyer moves around the interview, they can click on the legal material language, so that if they didn't catch that when they read the instructions or at the training, or they need a refresher to understand what that exactly means, they can click on there, and they are linked back to the definition that gives them the statute, the reference, and exactly what those terms may mean. So the lawyer, even if he's a copyright expert that has never done an expungement or criminal law, doesn't have to be flipping through all of these manuals, and completing the form is a lot more convenient. I am going to end now in consideration of my other panelists. If anybody on the call is interested in finding out if there are any projects like this going on, reach out to either me or Miranda Watkins, who's also on the call. We can tell you what contents is available in your state, and if there may be ways to modify that content for pro bono attorneys. Some states, Arkansas for example, told me they have over 100 forms already enabled for pro bono lawyers in the state of Arkansas, with Walmart as corporate counsel and doing Saturday clinics and other projects. So it could be that there's already content that could be work collaborative with the owner of that content, or maybe something that could just be quickly modified, and or maybe there's already something going on and I just need to do the connection. So please reach out to us if you're interested in exploring this. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Claudia. There's a question about replicating the expungement project that we can get you offline. So thank you.
Okay.
Great. Well, we're going to move along to Michael now, and hopefully folks can stay with us a little bit after the half hour here to get to this. I was really excited that Michael could join us because Public Counsel is one of the first programs to develop a mobile app with a particular focus on pro bono, and I know there's a lot of interest in mobile in the community. We talked about this on a previous webinar, LSNTAP webinar last month. So Michael's going to take us through the how and what of Force for Good, and share some of what they've learned about mobile strategies for pro bono volunteers.
Thanks, Liz. Hi, everybody. It is great to be the cherry on top of this Tech Sunday. This is, I'm really excited. There's a lot of folks out there who sound like who are implementing projects that really engage attorneys and volunteers, and that's what this is a tool it's designed to do too. On the front end, let me just give you a quick idea about Public Counsel, and I just have a few slides so that hopefully we can have time for questions at the end. But Public Counsel is in Los Angeles. We're headquartered in Los Angeles. We have now an office in the Bay Area, and increasingly most of our work is in the Los Angeles area and California broadly. We do work with veterans nationwide, and we have some issues that we work on nationwide. But just to give you a sense, we have about 5,000 volunteer attorneys, law students, and other professionals every year. And those are folks who do everything from come to a clinic to work with nonprofit organizations, to a law firm like Morrison Forster that's working with us on a major impact litigation for students in Los Angeles schools, and other firms doing that. So we have this real diversity of volunteers, and we wanted a tool to engage our volunteers specifically and help to deepen the connection to them. So what do? We build an iPhone app. I'm going to walk you through this. It's pretty simple, but the first screen you see here is an iPhone. The idea behind this is that these aren't our volunteers, our pro bono volunteers. They aren't necessarily, conceptually they aren't volunteers, and this isn't a charity. They're part of a force for good in people's lives. And we did that, and we said that because I think that matches up with pro bono volunteers' actual experience. So whether they're finalizing an adoption for a child in the foster care system, or they're participating in a pro se clinic, or they're taking on an impact case, they feel the real good that they're doing. And so we wanted to connect with that idea. So you open your iPhone, and Liz, you can go to the next slide. There's the Force for Good app. Liz, can you open the Force for Good app? So you see a very simple interface. It has a description. Public Counsel is the largest not-for-profit law firm of our kind in the country, and for people struggling with poverty, it's a force for good. So there's two options. And in fact, if you have the app, it actually has three options. But I will use this version. This was our sort of development model. The first is to refer a case. Can you click on that, Liz? Very simple. You know somebody, or you are somebody who needs our help. Give us your name, give us your email, describe it briefly, and send it to us. Just a very basic intake. We have much more complex intake systems here, but this is a quick way. Next slide, Liz. Take a case. Click on that Take a Case button, and you actually pull up a list of cases. Now, this was built. What we did was we had an already existing process where we have cases and clinics and opportunities that are ready to go right now. So we took that system and we made it work for the app. So that's what you're getting, a list, and this is a list that you could also get by email if you signed up for our top 10 list, as we call it, in email. Liz, can you click the next slide? Click on this. Again, very simple. It sends us an email directly with the case information, and we get back to you very quickly. Can you click the next one? And that's the Force for Good app. It is not going to change the world of technology, but it's been a very effective tool. It's been a very effective tool in a lot of ways. So I'm going to give you really quickly a couple of reasons why you need an app and a couple of reasons why you don't need an app, and a peek behind the development curtain on this. And Liz, I think I can take 2 minutes to do this. Sure. If folks can stay on for that. So the first reason why you need an app is because we are going mobile. People accessing Public Counsel's website, publiccounsel.org, from mobile devices, it tripled last year, and it's on pace to do about the same thing this year. I did a quick check. So tripled and then tripled again in a year. Mobile internet devices cross the digital divide. I've seen research on this that says, if you, and in fact you know this from your experience if you work with people with low income, this may be an essential device for people. and they may scrimp to have it, whereas they wouldn't have a laptop. But also your pro bono attorneys all have them. They cross the generational divide. Increasingly, everyone is going to have one. And they reach people where they are, whether it's at work or at home, or and you know this is true, even on vacation. So you have to be doing mobile. Second is, apps are a chance to really show who you are as an organization. They're a showcase, I think, for, in general, they're a showcase for design, for creativity. People actually expect that when they go to an app. They expect sort of a thoughtful approach, and they think about your organization and interact with you a little differently. It can be a chance to talk to media about your organization and your goals. So our app was written up in the ABA Journal. And there are local media who are going to cover you. There are national media like the ABA Journal or the American Lawyer magazine has a tech focus. There's a number of people out there media you can talk to. And I think the third reason to do it is because you have a project that's really built for an app. And that we can talk about that more offline. I'd love to get people's ideas and respond. So the reason why you don't need an app, real quickly, app development is expensive. It can be expensive. And that depends on three factors: the features you use, the design and programming of it, and the number of platforms. So we kept costs down by limiting the features. It's a very simple app. We contracted directly with an app developer and with the designer, and we built it only for iPhone. You know, there are 3 platforms right now. There may at some point be only 2, but Apple iOS system, the Android Google system, and BlackBerry. And for us, this was very cost effective. The cost was less than $4,000 from start to finish. But you can spend a lot more, and that's a real consideration. Because the second point is, do you really need to have an app if you have a good mobile-friendly website and app and email? Sorry, email is still the killer app for nonprofits. You should still be communicating with people by email, and your mobile-friendly website and your email working together can do a lot of the same things as an app. So you need a website, you need an email, do you need an app? Last thing, and I'm sorry I did go longer than 2 minutes, Liz, but is what you're doing now currently, is it working? So we have 5,000 volunteers, but our app downloads here for the Force for Good have been in the hundreds, not in the thousands. And that's okay, because we didn't plan for growth. But to do that, to really grow it, we would have had to convince our staff that who works with volunteers that they needed this, and what they were doing worked. So why change it? So, but I think that I would love to talk to people offline if you have any questions about development and about your ideas, because it can be a great tool for engaging your volunteers. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you, Michael. And I just wanted to echo Michael's comments earlier when we were talking offline about this webinar. One of the comments that Michael made to me that he's alluded to here was that having an app, and I think the same could go for having a presence on social media, is another way to indicate to your volunteers that you're open for business and provide another pathway for them to connect with you. So it's great to learn more about Public Counsel's work in this area and the outreach benefits that it's had.
And Liz, I should have, social media, I should have just said, is add that onto your list. I mean, that is, if people decide to connect with you on Facebook, that's as good as them deciding to download your app. And you can potentially do some of the same things even on social media of getting people excited about cases, getting them to your website, that kind of stuff.
Great. So there are a few other mobile initiatives to keep an eye on out there, 2 other that are active now specific to pro bono. Earlier this year, I think we heard about Illinois Pro Bono's app on the mobile webinar. Last month, we heard Vince Morris talk about the Arkansas Legal Services Partnership's iPhone app. And then in 2013, Pro Bono Net will be working with the Pro Justice MN team on a Pro Bono to Go initiative to develop not an app, but mobile optimized interview guides and settlement checklists for volunteers and advocates in courthouses and other on-the-go scenarios. So, but this is still a very new area for the community. So as Michael mentioned, let us know what your ideas are, what you're thinking about doing for mobile, and let's continue the discussion. So, so thank you all for joining again and staying with us a little bit later. And I've included the panelists' emails here. If anybody would like to follow up with them directly with any questions. And thank you again to all of our panel for being with us today. And we hope many of you will join us for the next webinar coming up in a couple weeks on providing legal services remotely. So thanks again to all, and have a great rest of the Pro Bono Celebration Week.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you to all the speakers who are here and everybody who attended. The registration for that next webinar is already up, along with our next roundtable, which is on online intake the 13th of November. Thanks.